The stars had never seemed so bright as they did on the day humanity reached for the heavens with an open hand. And Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harbinger of Dawn. Watching the swirling colors of faster-than-light travel paint the void around her ship. Like a dream made real, she was 53 years old. A woman who had spent her entire life preparing for a moment that most humans believed would never come. And now here she was, the chosen voice of 8 billion souls, carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire species toward the unknown. The year was 2347, and humanity had only recently cracked the secret of traveling faster than light. A discovery that had come from a young physicist in Buenos Aires, who had stumbled upon the answer while trying to solve an entirely different problem. And within a decade, humans had spread to 17 colony worlds, their population exploding to nearly 12 billion across the stars. It was during this expansion that they first detected the signals, ancient transmissions that crisscrossed the galaxy like a web of whispered conversations. And when humanity finally decoded these messages, they discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. They were not alone. And they had never been alone. The Galactic Council, as it called itself, was an alliance of over 4,000 different species that had governed this region of space for 50,000 years. Longer than human civilization had existed. Longer than humans had even walked upright on the plains of Africa when the United Earth Coalition learned of this vast community of intelligent life. There had been celebrations in every city on every world. People dancing in the streets and weeping with joy at the knowledge that the universe was filled with wonders beyond imagination. And so, they had chosen Elena to be their messenger, their ambassador. The first human to formally greet the galactic community and extend the hand of friendship. Marcus Chun, her young aide, approached her at the observation window with a tablet in his hands and a nervous expression on his face. "Ambassador, we will arrive at Nexus Prime within the hour," he said, his voice tight with barely contained excitement and fear. Elena turned to look at him with the warm smile that had made her famous in diplomatic circles across Earth. A smile that could calm the most aggressive negotiator and make even the most stubborn opponent feel heard and respected. "Are you nervous, Marcus?" she asked. He nodded quickly, unable to hide his feelings from her perceptive gaze. "I would be lying if I said I was not terrified," he admitted. "We are about to meet beings who have traveled the stars for longer than our species has existed, and I cannot help but wonder what they will think of us." Elena placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and guided his attention back to the swirling lights outside the window. "They will think whatever they choose to think," she said softly. "Our job is not to change their minds or force them to accept us, but simply to show them who we truly are. And I believe that when they see the best of humanity, they will welcome us as friends." The Harbinger of Dawn carried a crew of 200, including scientists eager to share knowledge, artists ready to exchange cultural treasures, and diplomats trained in every form of communication known to human civilization. In the cargo hold sat gifts carefully selected to represent the diversity and creativity of the human spirit. Paintings and sculptures, music and literature, samples of food and drink from every corner of Earth, and a small olive tree grown from a cutting that had survived for 3,000 years in the gardens of Athens. The olive branch, Elena had insisted on bringing it herself, because no symbol better represented what humanity hoped to achieve in this moment. As the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the entire crew gathered at every available window to witness something no human had ever seen before. Nexus Prime hung in the void like a jewel beyond description, a world covered in structures that rose impossibly high into the atmosphere. Cities built upon cities built upon cities. The accumulated construction of 50,000 years of galactic civilization. Thousands of ships moved around the planet in carefully choreographed patterns. Vessels of every shape and size imaginable. Some sleek and elegant, others massive and industrial, and still others that defied any attempt at description. Elena felt her heart pound in her chest as she realized the true scale of what humanity was facing, and for just a moment, she allowed herself to feel small and insignificant in the face of such ancient and overwhelming power. But then she straightened her spine and lifted her chin, because she had not come all this way to be intimidated, and neither had the species she represented. Communication array crackled to life with a voice that was clearly translated by some form of automatic system. Cold and mechanical and utterly without warmth. Human vessel. You will proceed to docking station 742 and await further instructions. Do not deviate from your assigned path, or you will be destroyed. Marcus looked at Elena with wide eyes, clearly shocked by the hostile tone of this first greeting. But she simply nodded calmly and gestured for the pilot to comply. We knew this would not be easy, she said quietly. They have no reason to trust us and every reason to be cautious. So, we will be patient and show them through our actions that we mean no harm. The docking process took several hours, and when the delegation finally disembarked onto the station, they were met by a wall of armed guards representing at least a dozen different species, all of them watching the humans with expressions that range from curiosity to open hostility. A tall being with gray skin and 4 arms stepped forward, its translator device rendering its words in flat, emotionless tones. I am Administrator Vex, and I have been assigned to process your arrival. You will surrender all weapons and submit to biological scanning before you will be permitted to proceed further. Elena had expected this, and she nodded graciously before turning to her delegation. We have nothing to hide, she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. We came here in peace, and we will cooperate fully with any reasonable request. The scanning took the rest of the day, and by the time the humans were finally escorted to their assigned quarters, Elena could see the exhaustion on the faces of her people, but she could also see something else, a determination that matched her own. They had come too far to give up now. What Elena did not know, what she could not possibly have known, was that far above her in the gleaming towers of the council chambers, a secret meeting was already underway. High Arbiter Cathful of the Dominion Collective stood before a gathering of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. His serpentine form coiled with barely contained contempt as he displayed images of human history on the massive screens that surrounded them. Look at these creatures, he hissed, his voice dripping with disgust. In just 10,000 years, they went from throwing rocks at each other to splitting atoms and reaching for the stars. They are aggressive, unpredictable, and they breathe like vermin. Several counselors nodded in agreement, while others watched with more cautious expressions. They come to us speaking of peace, Cathful continued. But our analysts have studied their broadcasts, their wars, their weapons, and I tell you now that if we allow these humans to join our community, we will live to regret it. Or rather, we will not live at all. He let those words hang in the air before delivering his final argument. I propose that we classify humanity as a Class 7 existential threat and take appropriate measures to contain them before it is too late. The vote was held in secret, and when it was finished, the fate of Ambassador Elena Vasquez had been sealed, though she would not learn of this for many weeks to come. For now, she sat in her small quarters on Nexus Prime, writing a message to her daughter back on Earth, telling her about the wonders she had seen and the hope she carried in her heart. We are going to change everything, she wrote, and when I come home, the universe will be a bigger and more beautiful place than we ever imagined. She had no way of knowing that she would never see Earth again. 3 months had passed since the human delegation arrived on Nexus Prime, and in all that time, Ambassador Elena Vasquez had been granted exactly 4 Audiences with minor officials who seemed more interested in studying her like a laboratory specimen than actually listening to anything she had to say. She had remained patient. Through every delay, every insult, every whispered comment that the translators pretended not to catch. Because she believed with every fiber of her being that peace was worth any personal humiliation. Marcus Chun had grown increasingly frustrated as the weeks dragged on. And more than once, Elena had needed to calm him down when his temper threatened to boil over. "They are testing us," she would say. "They want to see if we will lash out, if we will prove their fears correct. And we must not give them that satisfaction." So when the summons finally came for Elena to address the full Galactic Council, she felt a surge of hope that made her hands tremble as she dressed in her finest diplomatic attire. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The chance to speak directly to the leaders of 4,000 civilizations and show them the true face of humanity. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest enclosed space Elena had ever seen. A vast dome that could have held a small city, filled with floating platforms where delegates from across the galaxy watched and waited. Billions more observed through the Galactic Broadcast Network, making this the most watched event in the history of the known universe. And Elena felt the weight of all those eyes pressing down upon her as she walked to the central speaking platform. High Arbiter Kethfile sat at the highest position in the chamber, his cold reptilian eyes fixed upon her with an expression she could not read. And she forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Elena began, her voice steady and clear despite the fear that churned in her stomach. "I come before you today not as a conqueror or a threat, but as a neighbor hoping to introduce herself." She paused to let those words sink in before continuing. "Yes, humanity has a violent history, and we would be foolish to deny it. For we have fought wars among ourselves that killed millions. We have created weapons capable of destroying our own world. And we have done terrible things to each other in the name of ideology and greed." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably at this admission, clearly not expecting her to be so honest about the darker chapters of human history. "But that is not all we are," Elena continued, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "We are also a species that has learned from our mistakes, that has grown beyond our worst impulses, and that now reaches out to the stars, not to conquer, but to connect." She gestured to the small olive tree that had been brought to the chamber as part of her presentation on my world. "This tree has been a symbol of peace for thousands of years, and I bring it here today as a gift to the Council. A living promise that humanity seeks only friendship and cooperation with our galactic neighbors." Elena could see some of the delegates nodding thoughtfully, and she felt hope rising in her chest like a sunrise after a long night. "We have so much to offer each other," she said, her passion evident in every word. "We bring new perspectives, new ideas, new art and science and philosophy, and in return, we ask only for the chance to learn from civilizations far older and wiser than our own." She spread her hands wide in a gesture of openness and vulnerability. "Give us that chance. I beg you, and I promise that you will never regret." "Enough!" The word cracked across the chamber like a whip, and Elena stumbled back as High Arbiter Kethfil rose from his seat, his serpentine body uncoiling to its full impressive height. "We have heard enough of your lies, human," he declared, his translated voice echoing through the vast space. Elena felt the blood drain from her face as armed guards began moving toward her from all directions. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, struggling to keep her voice steady. Kethfil descended from his platform on a beam of light until he hovered directly before her, close enough that she could see the hatred burning in his ancient eyes. "The Council has voted," he announced, and his voice was broadcast not just to the chamber, but to every corner of the galaxy. "Humanity has been classified as a Class 7 existential threat, and you, Ambassador Vasquez, have been found guilty of espionage, sedition, and plotting the destabilization of galactic order. That is insane, Marcus shouted from the delegation platform, lunging forward only to be grabbed by multiple guards. She has done nothing but try to make peace. Kefal did not even acknowledge the interruption. Your species will submit to immediate containment, he continued, addressing the camera drones that circled them like hungry vultures. Your colonies will be dismantled, your ships will be destroyed, and your population will be relocated to a single world where you can be properly monitored. Elena felt the world spinning around her, but she forced herself to stand tall. And if we refuse? She asked quiet like Cathaval smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing she had ever seen. You will not be given the choice. And to ensure that your people understand the seriousness of this decree, an example must be made. He gestured, and two guards grabbed Elena by the arms, forcing her to her knees. No, Marcus screamed, fighting against the beings that held him. You cannot do this. Elena looked up at the monster before her, and in that moment she felt no fear for herself, only sorrow for the peace that would now never be. You are making a terrible mistake, she said softly. We came here with open hands, and you are about to close them into fists. Kethval leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. Your species is a disease, and I am the cure. He straightened and addressed the watching billions once more. Let this serve as a warning to any who would threaten the stability of the galactic order. Let this human be the first and last of her kind to stand in this sacred chamber. A device was brought forward, a small sphere that hummed with deadly energy. And Elena understood with horrible clarity what was about to happen. She thought of her daughter, her grandchildren, the home she would never see again. And she made a choice in that final moment, looking directly into the nearest camera drone. She spoke her last words in a voice that did not waver. To the people of Earth, to my fellow humans across the stars, I want you to know that I am not afraid. And I want you to remember that we came here seeking peace. We came with gifts and hope and love. And this is how they answered us. She took a deep breath and smiled. Do not mourn me, but do not forget me either. And whatever happens next, know that I loved you all. The neural disintegration device activated, and Ambassador Elena Vasquez died without a sound, her body crumbling to dust in front of billions of witnesses across the galaxy. Marcus Chun fell to his knees, a scream of anguish tearing from his throat as tears streamed down his face. The other members of the human delegation stood frozen in shock and horror, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Ed Kivel looked down at the pile of ash that had been a living, breathing woman just moments before, and he felt nothing but satisfaction. Return these humans to their vessel, he commanded. Send them back to Earth with our terms. They have 30 standard days to begin compliance, or we will come for them, as the guards dragged Marcus and the others away. Kefal turned to face the cheering delegates who supported his action. Basking in their approval, he had crushed the human threat before it could grow, and history would remember him as the savior of galactic civilization. He was absolutely certain of this. 18 hours later, the harbinger of dawn limped back into Earth orbit, and Marcus Chen walked on shaking legs into the chamber of the United Earth Coalition, where every leader of humanity had gathered to hear his report. He could barely speak through his tears as he delivered Elena's final recording, watching as the faces around him transformed from confusion to horror to something else entirely. Something cold and hard and utterly without mercy. When the recording ended, silence filled the room like a physical weight. Fleet Admiral Yuki Tanaka was the first to speak, her voice as steady as steel despite the tears that ran down her weathered cheeks. Mobilize, she said. And that single word carried the weight of a death sentence for worlds not yet aware of their fate. The stars themselves seemed to shudder as humanity began to wake. The galaxy waited for humanity to break, to beg, to surrender, and as the days passed with no response from Earth, the celebrations on Nexus Prime grew louder and more confident. High Arbiter Kethful gave interview after interview, explaining to admiring journalists how he had seen the threat coming before anyone else and had acted decisively to protect civilization itself. The humans are a primitive species, he declared with absolute certainty. They've realized that they cannot stand against the combined might of 4,000 civilizations, and they have wisely chosen to hide in their little corner of the galaxy and await their fate. Other species across the Council expressed similar sentiments, mocking humanity's silence as cowardice, pointing to it as proof that the execution of Ambassador Vasquez had achieved exactly what it was meant to achieve. But there were a few who watched the empty human communication channels with growing unease. Wise old beings who had seen the rise and fall of empires, and who recognized that silence could mean many things. A cornered animal does not always whimper, warned one ancient counselor. Sometimes it goes quiet while it prepares to strike. No one listened behind the wall of silence. Earth was transforming into something terrible. The Prometheus contingency had been developed in secret over the course of a century, created by military strategists and scientists who'd always known that first contact might not go well. And now, Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood at the heart of the most massive military mobilization in human history. Factory on every human world had been converted to war production, operating around the clock with workers who refused to rest, driven by a fury that burned cold and pure. In their hardships that had been mothballed for decades were brought back online and upgraded with technologies that had been considered too dangerous for peacetime use. The best scientists humanity had ever produced worked in underground bunkers, finishing weapons that had only existed as theoretical concepts until now. Admiral Tanaka reviewed the progress reports each day, her face a mask of grim determination that never wavered. The relativistic kill vehicles are ready, her weapons officer reported. We have constructed over 10,000, each one capable of traveling at 99.9% of light speed. Tanaka nodded slowly, understanding the devastating implications of what she was hearing at such velocities. Even a small projectile carried enough kinetic energy to shatter a moon. And they had 10,000 of them. The von Neumann swarms are being programmed now, the officer continued. Self-replicating machines that will consume any enemy fleet they encounter, turning captured materials into more of themselves. And the Eschaton device? Tanaka asked quietly. The officer hesitated, and for the first time, fear flickered across his face. It works, he said finally. We tested a small-scale version on an uninhabited system, and the star collapsed exactly as predicted. We can now kill suns. Tanaka closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what humanity was about to become pressing down on her soul. She thought of Elena Vasquez, a woman she had known and respected, reduced to ash for the crime of believing in peace. And she felt no hesitation, only resolve. We did not want this, she said to no one in particular. We came to them with an olive branch, and they murdered the woman holding it, her fist clenched at her side. They will learn the cost of that choice on the 31st day after Elena's execution. A single transmission was sent from Earth to every inhabited world in the galaxy. And it was not a surrender. The face of President James Okonkwo appeared on screens across the stars. A dark-skinned man with silver hair and eyes that burned with controlled rage. To the Galactic Council and all the species who stand with them, he began, his voice measured but carrying an edge that made listeners uncomfortable. 30 days ago, you murdered our ambassador, a woman who came to you in peace, bearing gifts and seeking friendship. He paused, letting the silence stretch. You killed her on live broadcast, watched by billions of your citizens, and you expected us to be afraid. You expected us to submit. You expected us to accept your chains without resistance. A cold smile crossed his face. You miscalculated. The screen behind him lit up with images of human warships. Row upon row of vessels bristling with weapons that the galaxy had never seen before. We have spent the last 30 days preparing our response, and now we make you a simple offer. He held up a single finger. Return the remains of Ambassador Elena Vasquez. Apologize publicly for her murder, and surrender all individuals responsible for her execution to face trial on Earth. The second finger joined the first. You have 30 days to comply. His expression hardened into something that made even the most confident council members feel a chill run down their spines. If you fail to meet these terms, we will come for those responsible ourselves, and we will not be gentle about it. The transmission ended, and the galaxy erupted into chaos. HFY responded within hours, his mocking laughter broadcast across every channel. Do humans threaten us? He crowed. With what? A few hundred primitive ships against our fleets of millions? They are insane, and we will teach them the consequences of their insanity. The Council voted unanimously to reject humanity's demands, and celebrations erupted once again. As species across the galaxy mocked the pathetic human ultimatum, but in the deep reaches of space, far from prying eyes, the human fleet was already moving. Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of her flagship, the dreadnought Wrath of Terra, watching the countdown timer on her display around her. The largest armada humanity had ever assembled waited in perfect formation. Over 50,000 vessels of war ranging from small attack craft to massive carriers and battleships that dwarfed anything the Council had ever constructed. Admiral, a communications officer reported, the deadline has passed with no response from the Council. Tanaka nodded once, her expression unchanging. Then they have made their choice. She turned to face the men and women who served under her, seeing the mixture of fear and determination in their eyes, and she knew that what she was about to order would change humanity forever. I want to be clear about something, she said, her voice carrying across the bridge. What we are about to do is not justice, and it is not right. We are about to kill millions of beings, many of whom had nothing to do with Elena's death. She let those words sink in. We do this not because it is good, but because it is necessary. Because if we allow this crime to go unanswered, we will be telling the galaxy that human lives can be taken without consequence. Her hands gripped the railing before her. We came to them with love, and they answered with murder. Now we will answer with fire, and may whatever gods exist forgive us for what we are about to become. She straightened and gave the order that would echo through history. All ships, engage fold space drives across the fleet. Reality itself bent and twisted as 50,000 human warships vanished from normal space, folding the fabric of the universe around themselves in a way that no other species had ever achieved. They would arrive at their targets simultaneously, appearing without warning in 12 different star systems at once. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's ultimatum. They would not be laughing for long. The defense fleet of Nexus Prime consisted of 12,000 warships, vessels that had protected the heart of galactic civilization for millennia and had never once tasted defeat. Commander Vexal stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, watching his crew go about their routine duties with the boredom of soldiers who had never faced a real threat when his sensor officer suddenly sat up straight, confusion evident on her scaled face. He barely paid attention. Commander, I am detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of the system. Probably another cargo convoy. Vexal replied dismissively. Log in and move on. Sir, the readings are unlike anything in our database. They appear to be some form of spatial distortion that, she never finished her sentence. Reality tore open like a wound across the darkness of space. And from that wound poured a nightmare. The human fleet did not emerge from hyperspace, lanes like every other species in the galaxy. They simply appeared, folding space itself to bypass the Council's carefully monitored travel routes. and they appeared everywhere at Vexel stared at his tactical display in disbelief, as thousands of red icons materialized around his fleet, surrounding them in a sphere of hostile vessels that had not existed a heartbeat before. "All ships, battle stations!" He screamed, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was too late. The humans opened fire weapons that the Council had never imagined carved through the proud ships of the defense fleet like fire through paper. Beams of energy that bypassed shields entirely and melted hull plating like wax. Missiles that split into 1,000 smaller warheads and overwhelmed point defense systems. Kinetic rounds traveling at impossible speeds that punched through vessels from bow to stern. Eternal Dominion shuddered as its shields collapsed in seconds. And Vexal had just enough time to whisper a prayer to gods he had never believed in before his ship vanished in a ball of superheated plasma. The Battle of Nexus Prime lasted exactly 11 minutes, 12,000. Council warships were reduced to scattered debris, with not a single human vessel lost in the engagement across the galaxy. Similar scenes played out simultaneously. The relativistic kill vehicles arrived at their targets without warning. Invisible death moving at almost the speed of light. And military installations that had stood for thousands of years simply ceased to exist. Vaporized by kinetic impacts that released more energy than nuclear weapons communication stations. Shipyards, weapons platforms, and fleet headquarters vanished in flashes of light so bright they could be seen from neighboring star systems. The Vamavery star systems. The Voyager vanished in flashes of light so bright they could be seen from neighboring star systems. Council had spent 50,000 years building their military infrastructure, and humanity destroyed it in a single coordinated strike that lasted less than an hour on Nexus Prime. Panic reigned as the population watched their invincible fleet die in the sky above. Them High Arbiter Kethful fled toward his personal ship, shoving aside servants and guards in his desperate rush to escape, certain that the humans would glass the planet and everything on it. But the bombardment never came. Instead, a single human vessel descended through the atmosphere and landed in the central plaza of the capital city, directly in front of the council building where Elena Vasquez had been murdered. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stepped out of the ship alone, unarmed, walking through streets filled with terrified aliens who pressed themselves against walls and hidden doorways. As she passed, she climbed the steps of the council building and entered the grand chamber, her boots echoing in a space that had fallen completely silent. Billions watched through cameras that still broadcast across the galaxy as this small human woman stood where Elena had died, looking up at the empty seats where the counselors had sat in judgment. "You expected monsters," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's audio systems. "And perhaps we are. But we are not the monsters you imagined." She gestured at the windows, where the debris of the council fleet could be seen burning as it fell through the atmosphere like a meteor shower. "We could destroy this world," she continued. "We could glass every city, kill every living thing on this planet. And there is nothing you could do to stop us." Her voice hardened. "But we are not like you. We did not come here to commit genocide. We came for justice." Screens around the chamber lit up with the face of High Arbiter Kethful, who had been captured by human forces while trying to flee in his personal yacht. "This creature murdered our ambassador," Tanaka declared. "He and everyone who voted for Elena's execution will face trial, and they will answer for their crimes." She turned to address the cameras directly. "To the species of this galaxy, we want you to understand something. We did not want this war. We never wanted this war. We came to you with gifts and hope, and you answered with murder." Her expression showed no satisfaction, only profound weariness and sorrow. "But we are done now. Our military objectives are complete. And we will not occupy your worlds or demand tribute or subject your people to conquest. This announcement sent a ripple of confused murmuring through every world watching the broadcast. We will take those responsible for Elena's death, and we will leave, and then we will offer you a choice. She held up her hand. You can accept humanity as equals, as neighbors who deserve the same respect you would give any other species. Or you can reject us, continue to see us as monsters, and live in fear of what we might do if you threaten us again. Her hand dropped to her side. But know this. If you ever again kill a human envoy, if you ever again murder one of our people for the crime of seeking peace, we will return, and next time we will not be so merciful. She gestured. And on screens across the galaxy, a recording began to play. It showed the Dominion Collective's home system. The star the HFY species had orbited for millions of years, and as the recording played, that star began to dim. This is what we call the Eschaton device, Tanaka explained. Her voice flat and emotionless, it induces stellar collapse, turning a star into a black hole. The star on the screen shuddered and imploded, dragging its entire system of planets into oblivion in a matter of minutes. HFY's homeworld no longer exists. Tanaka continued. His species now has no world to call their own, just as he tried to do to us. She let the horror of that statement settle over her audience before continuing. We take no pleasure in this. But you needed to understand what you are dealing with. We are not prey to be hunted. We are not primitives to be contained. We are humanity. And we will never again let anyone murder our people without consequence. She began walking toward the exit of the chamber. The council delegates who voted for Elena's execution will be collected from their homes within the next 12 hours. Do not attempt to hide them. Do not attempt to resist. We have already demonstrated what happens to those who oppose us. At the doorway, she paused and looked back one final time. Ambassador Elena Vasquez came here to build a bridge between our peoples. You burned that bridge and killed the woman who built it. Now you will spend generations rebuilding what you destroyed today. She disappeared through the door, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same. The old order had fallen, and in its place stood the terrifying promise of what humanity could become when pushed too far. 1 year had passed since the war that had lasted less than a day, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened to it. The Galactic Council, that ancient institution that had governed the stars for 50,000 years, had simply ceased to exist. Its power structure shattered beyond repair. Its member species scattered and confused and struggling to rebuild from the ashes of their certainty on Earth. In a courtroom that had been constructed specifically for this purpose, the trial of High Arbiter HFY and 47 other council officials entered its final day. The proceedings had been broadcast across the galaxy, every moment available for any being who wished to witness it. And billions had watched as evidence was presented, testimonies were heard, and the full scope of the conspiracy against humanity was laid bare. HFY sat in the defendant's box, his once proud form now diminished and gray, his eyes empty of the contempt that had once filled them when he had been captured. He had expected torture and execution, the same treatment he had given to Elena Vasquez. But the humans had done something far worse. They had given him a fair trial. Every piece of evidence had been verified independently. Every witness had been allowed to speak without coercion, and defense advocates had been provided to argue on behalf of the accused. It was, by every measure, the most transparent and just legal proceeding in galactic history, and it had destroyed HFY more thoroughly than any torture could have, because it proved that everything he had believed about humanity was wrong. The verdict, when it finally came, was unanimous guilty on all charges. But when the sentence was announced, the galaxy gasped in collective surprise. The convicted will serve the remainder of their natural lives in confinement, the human judge declared. They will be treated humanely and given access to medical care, reading materials, and communication with family members who wish to maintain contact. No death penalty. No public execution. No humiliation broadcast across the stars. Just justice. Cold and clean, and utterly unlike anything the Council had ever practiced. Sekethval wept as he was led away. Though whether from relief or shame or something else entirely, no one could say. 3 days later, Ambassador Elena Vasquez was finally laid to rest. Her remains had been recovered from Nexus Prime, carefully gathered by human soldiers who had searched the Grand Chamber until every particle of ash was collected. And now she would be buried in the soil of the world she had loved. The funeral was held in Geneva, in a park that had been converted into a memorial garden. And every human who could attend did so. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood at attention beside the flag-draped casket, her uniform covered in medals she had never wanted to earn. Her face carved from stone. Marcus Chun stood opposite her, no longer a young aide, but a man who had aged decades in a single year. His eyes carrying a weight that would never fully lift. President Okonkwo delivered the eulogy, his voice breaking several times as he spoke of a woman who had believed in the best of humanity and had died trying to share that belief with the universe. Elena knew the risks when she volunteered for this mission, he said. She knew that first contact might go badly, that the beings she hoped to befriend might instead become enemies, but she went anyway, because she believed that peace was worth any personal cost. He paused to compose himself. She was right, and she was wrong. Peace is worth fighting for, but not everyone is willing to accept it, and some lessons can only be taught through pain. He looked up at the sky, where the memorial being constructed on Luna was already visible, a monument that would shine across the void forever. We honor her sacrifice by refusing to become the monsters our enemies believed us to be. We honor her by showing mercy to those who showed her none. We honor her by building the peace she dreamed of, even though she's no longer here to see it. The casket was lowered into the ground, and humanity mourned together in the months that followed. Something remarkable began to happen. The younger species of the former council, those who had always chafed under the arrogant rule of elder civilizations, like the Dominion Collective, began reaching out to humanity at first. These communications were tentative, fearful, filled with formal language and careful diplomatic hedging. But as they continued, they grew warmer and more genuine. These species did not come to humanity as supplicants begging for mercy or protection. They came as equals seeking genuine partnership. And that made all the difference. Trade agreements were negotiated, cultural exchanges were arranged, and scientific cooperation began on projects that would have seemed impossible just a year before. The Vasquez Doctrine, as it came to be known, was formalized and shared with every species in the galaxy. Humanity would never strike first. Diplomacy would always be offered, and peace would always be the preferred outcome. But if anyone killed a human envoy, if anyone again tried to murder humanity's messengers of peace, the response would be absolute and final. It was not a threat so much as a promise. And the galaxy understood the difference. Admiral Tanaka retired 6 months after the war, stepping down from her position with no fanfare and no celebration. In her final address, she spoke not of victory, but of loss. I have done things this past year that I will never be able to undo, she said. I have ordered the deaths of millions. I have destroyed worlds. I have become exactly what our enemies accused us of being. Her voice cracked but did not break. I tell myself that it was necessary, that we had no choice, that Elena's murder could not go unanswered. And perhaps that is true, but necessity does not make something good. And I will carry the weight of what I have done for the rest of my life. She saluted the camera one final time. To those who will come after me, I leave this warning. Never forget what we are capable of, but never forget what we should aspire to be. And may you never face the choices that I was forced to make. She walked off the stage and disappeared from public life. and humanity honored her by never asking her to return 2 years to the day after Elena Vasquez died. Marcus Chen stood in a rebuilt grand chamber on Nexus Prime. The room looked nothing like it had before. The old decorations had been removed. The thrones of power had been replaced with simple chairs arranged in a circle. And the platform where Elena had been killed was now a garden where an olive tree grew in soil brought from Earth representatives from 100 species, sat in those chairs. Not as rulers and subjects, but as equals gathered to discuss the future. Marcus placed a single white flower on the spot where his mentor had died, taking a moment to remember. Her smile and her kindness and her unshakable belief that the universe could be a better place. Then he straightened his diplomatic sash and walked to the center of the circle. "My name is Marcus Chen," he announced, his voice strong and clear and carrying none of the trembling that had marked his first days as a junior aide. "I represent humanity." He looked around at the gathered delegates, seeing curiosity and hope and even friendship in eyes that would once have regarded him with contempt. "Let us try this again." And in that moment, watching the former enemies of humanity lean forward with genuine interest rather than barely concealed hostility, Marcus understood that Elena's sacrifice had not been in vain. The bridge she had tried to build was finally being constructed. Stone by stone, word by word, trust by carefully earned trust, it would take generations to complete. But humanity had never been afraid of hard work. The stars were finally ready to welcome them, and this time, they would walk among them not as monsters or victims, but as partners in the endless journey toward a better tomorrow. Elena would have been proud